But right now, I'd love to invite Karl up the front. You might put your hands together and welcome him.
Thank you.
Well, Karl, it's a great treat to welcome you back. Second day in a row, so we can make a habit of this. This will be terrific.
Terrific.
So as we get to the very first talk, talk a little about what the gospel is in the first talk this morning. But thought it might be really helpful for us to share a little bit about, well, you spent a lot of time building up the church and enabling leaders and followers of Jesus to share the good news and giving great resources and tools to share the good news. But how about you in this season of life? As you do that, you serve on a number of boards as well. What are your main front lines in life right now where you get to share the good news as a passionate follower of Jesus?
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of question because one of my issues in life really is it's all Christians. Like that's kind of where I spend my time with people like you today, which is fantastic and fabulous. It's just so it's the kind of pieces in life where I with Adam cycle. So I know that's a terrible failing, and I ride with a couple of mates on a Saturday morning, and a couple of them are church-going followers of Jesus, a couple of aren't. And that conversations we have over coffee at the end of the day, it's surprising how often it comes up and it just becomes a natural conversation. Secondly, say one of my neighbours, so I just interact on the street with one of my neighbours, and it's one of those things because he kind of knows what I do, but not completely. And we were just chatting the other day and the census results came out. And so we're just shooting a breeze about something on the street, and he said, so do you reckon the church has a future, Karl? What do you reckon? And it's just, so there's that opportunity to interact about, which we will actually in the next session. So there's those chances to influence the people that you talk to and just try and make it a natural conversation. And I'm really reminded as I say this, is a good mate of mine who is part of our church. He's a very, well, part of the church I used to run, our church. That was a while ago now. But he's a really well-known medical professional in Sydney. And he reminds me, like we chat all the time, and then he tells me every now and then of conversations he has. If you met him, he doesn't strike you as like this card-carrying, evangelical, gospel-focused kind of individual. He's just a very relaxed, high-profile professor of medicine in Sydney. Yeah, he just tells me about these conversations he has. Like the other day, we were chatting and he said, I was talking to my mate Craig, and who'd had a heart issue, and this guy's been fit all his life and he's had a heart issue. And just in the conversation, he said to Craig, so that's pretty worrying, isn't it? Man, how do you handle that? And Craig's like, and he says, so is spirituality a part of your life? And they had this really interesting conversation. And it's like that conversation I had with my neighbour. It's that notion of trying to make it not, okay, now's the gospel opportunity, steel yourself, say all the right stuff. What was that third point in the gospel presentation? And like, it's almost kills the conversation. And I'm reminded of that conversation I had with my neighbour just last week, and my mate had with his friend, where it's just, people are interested in spiritual things. It's just how do you get in that conversation so that they're relaxed to have the conversation with you rather than all of a sudden becomes a contentious gospel connection, that's the space that I want to be in. And it's tricky for people like us. We're the kind of Christian professional. And so with the people who are Christians in your life, they want to pepper you with all the questions about it. The people who aren't, it's a bit like, don't go near that. Don't get them started, So it's almost harder in some ways, so for it to be a natural conversation.
So you hinted a bit just then that obviously it's some time now, but you've made a transition from leading Christian community to now being involved in Christian community in different ways. And I just wonder that as you've made that shift, 20 years leading as pastor, as you've made that shift, how has the role of community changed, or how is it similar?
Yeah, just community in general?
Well, Christian community.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that struck me as I came, it's funny, like when you're buried, where Adam is running a church, you're sometimes drowning in trivia. You're trying to keep the thing going week to week, and the pressure that Adam would have been under over the last couple of years, and like church leaders across Australia, that's been incredibly difficult. And in the midst of all of that, you tend to get really focused on the nuts and bolts of running a church. And one of the things that struck me after I stopped running a church was, I think one of the things I didn't prioritise was actually community. I mean, there's a research that I read yesterday on the plane that talked about loneliness in Australia. And it's endemic, like really endemic. And it strikes me, we both ride a bike. And one of the things, where I ride in Sydney, on the weekend, there's heaps of people out riding bikes. I mean, these are middle-aged men in Lycra. I mean, it's embarrassing, really. Like, seriously, it's embarrassing, you know? And if that's not bad enough, you notice this, Adam? You're out there riding in Lycra, and then you see a group of blokes go past, and they're all wearing the same thing. And I'm like, really? Was it all on special? And it's not even a club. They're not even in their club colours. They've all gone out and bought the same outfit. And I'm like, what is that about? It's about belonging. That's what it's about. And I mean, seriously, if middle-aged blokes get out there in Lycra and want to dress the same, what does that say about how important it is to belong somewhere? And people struggle to belong. And I think, I mean, for me, it's been interesting because, you know, when you leave the church, you kind of, it's important to give the church a bit of space. So we didn't go for a couple of years, and the guy that took over from me, who's a good mate, said, look, you should come. So we sit in the back left corner. And so this community is still there, but it's just a reminder about that belonging thing is actually really important. And one of the things that the church should be doing today is helping people to belong as much as anything, making the door as open as you possibly can and giving people the opportunity to connect, because that's, in our communities, that's what they're desperate for, actually. And we've often, this is getting into technical church leadership stuff, but we've often had an argument about, you know, do we invite people in or do we go out to the community? And, you know, are we incarnational, which means we go out to the community, or are we kind of attractional, which means we invite them to the church? And we've had this big argument about it. It's a seriously dumb argument, because we should do both. But, you know, there are people, you know, you don't sell books if you tell everybody to do the same thing. So, you know, one of the ways to sell a good book is to create some new model. One of the dangers of that is we are cutting off, if we sort of say we're only going to go out, we're only going to go in the community, we're cutting off one of our best opportunities, and that is to get people to belong, to be a part of a community. And to feel that they're loved and cared for. And that whole community thing is really significant.
Final question, and actually I should say, just because you don't have to cycle to belong.
No,
yeah, that's
no. In fact, it's probably
clear.
a whole bunch
Definitely
easier not to.
That's right.
It's less expensive. It's less embarrassing. There you go.
Definitely don't have to. The final question, as someone individually, so as a person who's a passionate follower of Jesus, what are the rhythms in your life that really sustain you and fuel you in your relationship with God?
Yeah, I think that there's been a few things over the years, because one of the things, again, if you're sort of leading a church, you kind of become, this is going to sound odd, a professional Christian. And so, you know, your whole spiritual life becomes your professional life, which is kind of odd. And so the way you survive doing that, survive is an awful word, isn't it? But the way you survive doing that is you actually have to pair off your own faith journey with what you do in your work. And so all my life, from when I was a kid, and I still do it now, in the beginning, early in the morning, well, not early, but in the mornings, most days I'll have a personal devotional time. And it's so unhip. It's so dull in the sense that there's nothing spectacular about it. I read the Bible. I read scripture union notes. Can you believe that? I pray. I have a prayer list. I even journal, which makes me sound like a total tree hugger. But here, what am I doing here? Not every morning do I walk away from that feeling somehow revived and reinvigorated, but it's that rhythm that's important, that it's a part of who I am as a person. And I often talk to church leaders and they'll say things like, oh, well, I read the Bible when I'm preparing for a sermon. It's a bit like, no, that's your work. Read the Bible for yourself. And all of you should make this a part of your daily rhythm as much as you possibly can. It's all on my phone these days. And so thing about your phone, it's great because I have the Bible on my phone, I have my Bible notes on my phone, I have my prayer list on my phone, and the prayer list has a whole bunch of subsections. I pray for different groups, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I move things from my prayer notes, like as in praying for my weekend at St Bart's, and if today goes well, I will put that in my praise notes. Thank you, God, for being with me, in this time in St Bart's. So that's all part of these notes. But you know what's the problem with your phone? For those of you who have a smartphone, everything's on your phone, which I love, but it's so distracting. So cop this. I actually light a candle every day, and the candle is not somehow more spiritual. The candle is a physical reminder of what I'm doing here. And so when I go to flick to something like Facebook, that godless place, I'm like, the candle's there to remind you, no, Karl, get back to why you're here. And so I sit down at the same spot. I get out my phone, read the notes for the day, write some notes, go through my prayer, and the whole time the candle's a reminder, a physical reminder of what I'm trying to do. That just builds rhythms into my life, which are really important.
Thanks, Karl. Would you like to put your hands together and welcome Karl?
Thank you. Thanks, Adam.